All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Minister James Moss. I'm back here again with another installment of Continuing Education. And we are almost done with the book of Colossians. This is number 8 out of 9 videos. You know, I almost thought that I miscounted a couple of times. I had to go back and recount. Yeah. But yeah, this is 8 out of 9. And then also you have that beginning video that says before you dive in. Okay, so listen, this one is an encouragement for prayer. And we're going to pick up in chapter 4 where we left off, go from chapter 4, verses 2 through 6. We'll do the introduction, which is pretty brief. We'll read the scriptures, and then we'll come back for the commentary. All right, and then after that, we'll be on to our last chapter, which is Paul's final instructions and greetings. All right, let's do it. All right, as he began to draw his letter to a close, Paul turned his focus back to the church as a whole, reminding the Colossians of their corporate responsibilities. All right, so chapter 4, verse 2 through 6. All right, and it reads, "Continue in prayer and watch in the same with thanksgiving. With all praying also for us that God would open unto us a door of utterance to speak the mystery of Christ, for which I am also in bonds, that I may make it manifest as I ought to speak. Walk in wisdom toward them that are without, redeeming the time. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man." All right. Paul, eloquent. All right, starting with verse 2. The believers were responsible to pray. Prayer was their lifeline to God. To devote themselves to prayer meant that they should be persistent and unwilling to give up, even though their prayers may seem to go unanswered. We need to kind of adopt that same mentality, right? Self included, trust me. Paul's advice to keep on praying has the same meaning. Their devotion to prayer did not mean that they should spend all their time on their knees, but that they should have a prayerful attitude at all times. This attitude would be built upon acknowledging their dependence on God, realizing his presence within them, and determining to obey him fully. Then they would find it natural to pray frequent, spontaneous, short prayers. I've taught that before. A powerful or a prayerful attitude is not a substitute for regular times of prayer, but should be an outgrowth of those times. Having an alert mind may have been referring to not dozing off, to being alert in their devotion, or to being alert for God's answers and then thankful when they come. More likely, he was focusing on the anticipation of the Lord's coming. The Lord could return at any time, so believers should be found alert and waiting. As Paul mentioned several times, the believers ought also to be thankful. Thankfulness implies understanding all that God has done by anticipating what he promises. The Colossian believers could have a part in Paul's worldwide ministry by praying for him and his co-workers. Paul requested prayer for opportunities to preach in spite of his imprisonment so that he could continue to proclaim God's secret plan, that the message is also for the Gentiles. Although Paul was in chains for preaching the gospel, the chains could not stop the message. Paul asked for the ability to proclaim the message clearly. In other words, Paul wanted to be able to reveal the mastery so that many could hear and believe. This was his compulsion. He had been called. Paul, in verse 5, Paul reminded the believers of their responsibility to be wise in the way they acted toward those who are not Christians. Paul was observing that while Christian fellowship does make some allowances for the mistakes of its own, the world will not. Ain't that the truth? Christians' behaviors toward unbelievers should be above reproach. The believers were not to hide from the world in a secret organization. Instead, they were to live in the world. They were to make the most of every opportunity to share the gospel with unbelievers. Paul was communicating a sense of urgency. Verse 6. The spoken word would be the communication method. Therefore, the believers should be wise in how they spoke. Speech that is gracious is kind and courteous. Speech that is effective is interesting, invites interaction, adds spice to a discussion, and is pure and wholesome. Believers should always be ready to answer questions about their faith and be ready to share words of personal testimony. No Christian should have a dull, tiresome, know-it-all monologue of his faith. Instead, Christians who have the most exciting news in the world to share should be able to share that message with excitement, ability to invoke interest, an understanding of the basics, a willingness to listen and discuss, and a desire to answer everyone's questions graciously. All right, and that brings us to the end of this one. This was a short one, but still very informative, and I hope that you really take the time out to come back, read it, and listen to the commentary, and and just again pray. It talks about prayer here, the importance of it, and even to what varying degrees you're able to have a prayerful mind. So, with that being said, that's all we got to say for this video, this section. God bless you. I appreciate you so much. God keep you, and remember, always keep studying.